I really appreciate Representative Proctor being willing to speak to us. Go ahead and come on up. He is going to speak to us on the 5th Annual Veterans Strategic Summit that was held this past summer. So, the floor is yours, sir.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members of the committee. It's an honor to be here to talk to you. I feel a little strange because a lot of you were at the event that I'm about to talk about, so feel free to correct me as I go. But about 6 years ago, Representative Croft, the majority leader, he started a kind of an annual event, which was the Veterans Summit. It's had several names. Right now it's the Strategic Summit. But the idea was a great one. The idea was every year after the session and before the next session, we're going to get the leadership, the state leadership of as many veteran service organizations as we possibly can together and let them tell us what it is that they want us working on for them and for their members in their various veteran service organizations. Every year it gets bigger. Every year it gets better. This last year, September 30th, was no exception. We had leadership from the VFW, American Legion, DAV, or Disabled Veterans of America, and the Vietnam Veterans of America. Too many groups to mention them all that came here for this one-day summit. What we did this year, which I really liked, I think is sustained for following years, is we kind of had a panel discussion, and several of the people are here in the room with us. Were on that panel, including myself. And after the panel discussion, we did breakouts in committee rooms around the Capitol where groups of veterans could talk to legislators directly and kind of work through the different legislative ideas that they had. It was kind of a great way to really flesh out the ideas. Then all the breakout groups came back together, and each group briefed the policy ideas that they had. Not surprisingly, several of the breakout groups had the same idea. So we consolidated that list, and then we asked all the people who were there, all the veterans that were there, to vote on which ideas they liked most, that they thought were the highest priority. Because, as you know, we get 90 days a year, and we can't work on everything. So we wanted the veterans to tell us, these are the things that we absolutely have got to get done for veterans in Kansas. And so I'm going to go through that list. I'm going to talk a little bit about what we've done and where we are now on that list. And I think you all have a copy of it. This is not every idea. This is just the top 5. There were probably 30 policy ideas. Some of them got 1 vote. Some of them got all the votes. And so these are the top 5 to come out of the summit. The first one was disabled veteran property tax relief. That was the #1 issue for veterans. We've been working on that one for a while. All of the last biennium, we worked on a bill 2036 that then turned into part of conference committee report for House Bill 2096. Through that process, we kind of got all the stakeholders involved in it and refined the idea. It started out as a exemption for everybody 50% or more disabled on a kind of graded scale based on how disabled you were. The challenge with it was that it was a kind of beforehand exemption, and the cost was going to be borne by the counties, the cities, and the schools. Which, especially in places like Leavenworth County, where I'm from, Geary County and Riley County, where Fort Riley is, and then not so much in Sedgwick, because it's a much smaller percentage of the total population. There was a lot of consternation about that idea. And so through the process of that biennium, we were able to kind of restructure the bill. So it was a rebate from the state. So the veteran would pay their property taxes and then they would file for a rebate of those taxes at the end of the year. What we ended up sending the governor, which got vetoed because it was packaged with some stuff that none of us liked, was two separate measures. One of them was called the Veterans Valor Act. And the way it went to the governor, and I'll talk about kind of the current incarnation in a minute, but the way it went to the governor, anybody who was 100% permanent and total disabled or totally disabled due to unemployability, which is a special category that the VA recognizes, would be eligible for a 75% exemption of their property taxes, which was paid as a rebate, which came out to about $18 million. And then there was another measure to cover 50% disabled and seniors, and that was a property tax freeze. I think it was frozen at the 2022 level, and anything that 50% disabled or more, or a senior 65 or older paid above that 2022 level, they could get as a rebate from the state. That bill went to the governor in House Bill 2096 as part of a conference committee report, but it was bundled with some other stuff that she didn't like, and she vetoed it. And we sent it to her. It was literally the last vote on the last night of the veto session. So we weren't able to come back and override that veto. We did end up coming back for a special session, but the way the rules work, a special session is a new session. You can't work on bills from the previous session. So we weren't able to override that veto. This year I've sponsored a bill and filed a bill that a bunch of you are signed on to, House Bill 2005, which is the Veterans Valor Act Plus. It's very similar to the one that we sent the governor last year, but this time it also includes 100% disabled, because 100% disabled and 100% permanent and total are two different things in the CFR, in the federal regulations. So we are also going to pick up the 100% disabled, which raises the price tag to about 21 million, and it's still a 75% exemption. That bill has a hearing in the tax committee next week. I would welcome all the co-sponsors and anybody else who wants to, in the gallery here or here, who wants to testify in that bill. Go to the tax committee website. There's an email where you submit written testimony, tell them you want to come testify in person, and then join us for that committee hearing, because I think that they need to hear from veterans that this is needed. And I'll save my powder on why it's so needed for the committee hearing. I'll just say we're trying to keep veterans in the state, and right now we're hemorrhaging veterans. But every year, 3,000 veterans separate from our military installations here in Kansas, and the vast majority of them go to Texas and Florida because they have property tax exemption and we don't. So we want to hang on to that talent. The next legislative priority that the veteran service organizations gave us was they would like us to pass a law to allow for charitable electronic gaming in the facilities of veteran service organizations as a way for them to raise money. These are all volunteer organizations, whether it's the VFW, American Legion, DAV, they're all volunteer organizations. And a lot of them have buildings that they have to maintain. They've got memberships that they have to maintain. They do a lot of good for the veterans of their community, from, helping a veteran that can't pay the bills, with their electric bill or whatever, to, when a veteran dies, taking care of their family, making sure that they're okay. That costs money. And there aren't a lot of revenue streams for these veteran service organizations. They get membership dues, but they are part of a national organization, so a lot of those dues go to the national organization. So they're always doing different fundraising activities to try to provide the funds to take care of the veterans and families in their area. And if you're a VFW in Leavenworth, post 56, which is my home post, or at Riley, or at Manhattan or Junction City or one of the surrounding communities for Fort Riley, It's expensive because there's a ton of veterans there, and they're looking for another revenue stream. And so they asked us to take a look at that. I don't have a bill in the works right now for that one, but I'm definitely going to take a look at that for next year, and I'd love help from anybody who wants to help. The next policy item was also about retaining veterans in the state, just another thing that we can do to incentivize veterans to stay here. They wanted us to exempt at least 2 vehicles from property tax. Right now, we do that for active duty. And so if you're an active duty service member, you get 2 vehicles exempted from property taxes if you register them here in Kansas. But the second that you take off the uniform and you're a veteran, not a service member, you lose that benefit. And a lot of these other states we're competing with, Texas, Florida, Nevada, Alaska, they do have this benefit. And so this is just another way to get at that, keeping those folks here. The next policy priority that they had was VSOs and VCAPs. So veteran service officers are folks that, and you guys have heard, I think, several bills on this or testimony on this. Veteran service officers help veterans and service members through the process of applying for disability with the Veterans Administration, or Veterans Affairs, which is Byzantine, to say the least, right? So you really do need somebody who's an expert on this to navigate the process. Go through your medical records, fill out the paperwork. There's a federal law that requires that every state have this capacity in our state. And the way that we do it here in Kansas is we've got the Office of Veteran Services that have some veteran service officers, but then we also subsidize the VFW and the American Legion so that they can provide this service as well, because there's just the Office of Veteran Services is not big enough. There aren't enough of those guys, and they're not making nothing. I mean, we're paying them a little bit, but it's not enough for what they do for our veterans. And so it's hard for them to find folks to do it. And they're constantly going through turnover with people that just, financially are not able to basically donate their time anymore to doing this for veterans. So the veterans have told us loud and clear, and they told us in the summit this year, we need more money so that we can get more folks. That problem was a problem before, but now we're, with the PACT Act that Senator Moran was so instrumental in getting passed it through Congress. You've got all these new claims for people that already had ratings. So there's a whole new round of people that are going to veteran service officers trying to get claims done under the PACT Act, and they're having challenges meeting the demand, and so they would like some more help with that. And then the final priority that they gave, it wasn't the final priority, but the final one on this list, because they had like 30 priorities, but the last of the top 5 here is exempting active guard and reserve military pay from income taxes here in Kansas. And you might be thinking, well, golly, we've got, tens of thousands of service members in our state at, Fort Riley, Fort Leavenworth, McConnell. How can we afford that? It's not going to cost you anything because they're not Kansas residents right now. We have there's a law, it's called the Servicemen Civil Relief Act, that says that a service member can just pick what state they're from. And I'm sure it's a complete coincidence, but they all pick Texas and Florida because they don't have an income tax either. So if we want these folks to be Kansans while they're here, so that maybe they feel a little more strongly about Kansas when it's time for them to retire and maybe they come back here, this is a great, essentially free way to do it, is exempt income taxes here. So when they come through, they become Kansas residents instead of being Texas or Florida residents. And if you combine it with all these other benefits that we already have, like the 2 cars being exempted from property taxes and some of these veteran things that I'm hoping we're going to get done, you're incentivizing people to stay here. The cost for it is about $4 million, and the reason it costs something is the active and the guard and the reserve service members. When they are on drill or on their 2-week AT, or if they're called to active duty, they're paying income taxes in Kansas right now. And so there is a cost because you're going to be exempting their their pay as well. But I mean, these folks, the stuff they do for our state, I mean, even more than the active duty service members, the Guard is being called all the time to do, everything from disaster relief to during COVID, they were moving tests and moving medical equipment for us. In my opinion, it's the least we can do for these folks to thank them for their service. But I have a bill. I had a bill last year to do this that stalled in the House Tax Committee. And the way the bill was written, very simply, the pay that you get for military service is exempted from Kansas income tax. There were some concerns on the House Tax Committee that I think the quote was, "Why are we giving generals a tax cut?" Which I kind of drove me nuts, because they're not getting a tax cut because they're not paying taxes in Kansas. They're residents of Texas or Florida. But to address that concern, when I refiled the bill this year, it's now House Bill 2036. Ironically, I've ushered 2036 through the building again. It exempts pay. It works exactly like combat pay. It exempts from income taxes the pay of an active Guard or reserve service member up to the rate of the highest ranking enlisted rank, which is an E9 Sergeant Major. And so if you're a general officer and you're making more than an E9, whatever you make above what a Sergeant Major makes would still be taxable. So I'm hoping that addressed the concern sufficiently that we'll be able to get that done this year in tax. We don't have a hearing date for it yet, but I'm working with Chairman Smith to hopefully get it on the calendar. I'm going to stop there, Mr. Chairman, and I'm open to answer any questions that anybody has. I would just say thank you for what you all do in this committee to take care of our military and veterans, and thank you for for the veterans in the room. Thank you for your service, and thank you for continuing to listen to and serve our veterans here in Kansas.
As I hear these bills, I remember paying Kansas tax when I lived in North Carolina at Fort Victory now. I remember paying Kansas income tax or Kansas tax while I was in Mannheim, Germany, and then Vilseck, Germany. We're still paying Kansas tax. And when I got out, we stayed in North Carolina. Now, I might get shot confessing that, but that's exactly what you're talking about, is the veterans are leaving. And we've got to do something about it, because I believe we owe it to them. I heard did a funeral a week or so ago that said the veterans give up their tomorrows so we can have our tomorrows. So anyway, that's my advertisement.
Chairman, you mind if I address that just a bit?
Absolutely.
So right now in Kansas, depending on the source you go to, we've got about 80,000 empty jobs that are out there that we can't find a human to do in the state of Kansas. And every year, 3,000 highly talented, highly motivated service members pack up their working age spouses and their kids, and they go to Texas and Florida. We're in a competition. We may not recognize that we're in a competition, but we're in a competition for that talent, and we are fighting with one arm behind our back. And that the number is not a small number. 21 million is a big number. I haven't been in this building so long that I no longer consider that a big number, but in so many ways, we're going to make that money back if we can retain this talent and get them into our workforce, growing our economy and growing their lives.
What do you have kind of a ballpark figure on what the return is that goes into our state economy?
Yeah. So a couple years ago, it may have been a year ago, in the Veterans Caucus, we had, I think it was the head of the VFW's VSO program, tell us that the benefits that they identify for disabled veterans equals about $600 million every year. And that's just the VFW. There's also an American Legion VSOs. There's also Office Veteran Services VSOs. So those are just the ones that the VFW knew about. $600 million. Those, if they're here, they're going to spend those $600 million here in Kansas. If they're in Texas or Florida, they're going to spend them in Texas or Florida. That's the tangible number, there's also an intangible number in terms of medical care. You know, because a lot of these veterans are going to be, well, they're either going to have TRICARE if they're retired and or VA benefits if they get a disability rating. The vast majority of those medical services that that veteran gets are not on at a VA hospital. They're on the economy. You know, I have a disability rating. I don't qualify for my own bill, but I do have a disability rating, and I had to have surgery on my hands. I didn't go to the VA hospital to do that. I went to KU Med, and KU Med did it. And so federal dollars went from the Veterans Affairs Department to KU Hospital to pay for that medical treatment and, you know, prop up our medical system. So I go on for days about all the financial benefits of keeping these folks in our state.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative Proctor. Thanks for all your work with these things. I mean, these have been important to get through the past couple of years. We can continue pushing on those. And I would echo what you said. I mean, I see a lot of veterans every day in Junction City, Morris County area. And I've got a couple good friends that have said as soon as their wives retire, they're gone. And these are senior officers that have retired in those communities. And I have a family member who lives right across the line of Missouri and said if these bills get passed, they bought some land, they want to build a house on this side of the line. Hopefully we can get those things done. And he's a veteran and disabled as well. So hopefully we'll get some of these things pushed through this year. Thanks for your work.
Mr. Chair, if I could, I live right on the Missouri River. I can darn near throw rocks at the bridge into Missouri. The number of people every morning you see driving from Missouri to Fort Leavenworth to work that are paying, that are not paying property taxes there because they've just passed this bill. And, it just breaks my heart. Those folks that could be in our community. Meanwhile, the city of Leavenworth is like in the bottom 13 in the state for population growth. We have negative population growth, and I can see them. they're right over there on the other side of the river. So, yeah, we got to retain this talent.